Your Honor, may it please the Court. The issue we have today is whether murder can be reduced to manslaughter where the heat of passion under which the offense was committed was the product of a continual period of provocation resulting in intermittent outbreaks of rage leading to the final lethal act. I answer no. The facts are these. The defendant was a 46-year-old man married to Rachel, who was a 20-year-old woman. The two had been married for a couple of days when Rachel went to Israel and returned and informed the defendant that she had taken a lover, that she thought she may be pregnant with her lover's child, and that she wished to divorce the defendant. Despite this, the two continued to live together for a period of 2 weeks, during which Rachel alternated between provoking the defendant into having sex and then withholding sex from him. Notably, on the day of July 22nd, the two had been engaged in heavy petting, and upon returning to their home, Rachel refused to have sex with the defendant, claiming that she was saving herself for her lover. Hearing this, the defendant made to leave the home, but Rachel stopped him, screaming, which led him to strangle her into unconsciousness. 2 days after this event, the defendant returned to the home he shared with Rachel to talk, but she was not there. The defendant proceeded to stay the night and wait 20 hours for her return. On July 26th, the defendant met Rachel when she returned home, and she said, "I suppose you have come here to kill me," to which the defendant responded, "Yes, no, yes," and then said, "I have come to talk to you." At this, Rachel began to scream, and a physical altercation broke out, the end result being that the defendant strangled Rachel to death with a phone cord. Voluntary manslaughter is defined as an intentional killing that would normally qualify as second-degree murder, but which is reduced to a lesser crime of voluntary manslaughter through the application of a partial defense, such as provocation, which is also known as the heat of passion, imperfect self-defense, or diminished capacity. The reasonable person test says that to prove adequate provocation, the following 4 elements must apply. The defendant must have acted in the heat of passion. The defendant was reasonably provoked into a heat of passion. The defendant did not have sufficient time to cool off between the provocative act and the killing, and a reasonable person in the defendant's shoes would not have had sufficient time to cool down. The defense that Rachel did not have The defense that the defendant did not have time to cool off is baseless. The facts of the case show that between the act of provocation, which was Rachel taking a lover, and the killing of Rachel, 2 weeks had elapsed. It is known that generally provocation happens in an instant. Rachel returned on July 13th, and the killing occurred on July 26th. That is 2 weeks between the act and the killing. A 2-week period is more than enough time for a reasonable person to cool off. The defense will argue that the length of time that the provocation lasted exempts the defendant from the modern test of the reasonable person. However, when we apply the 4 findings that are necessary to prove adequate provocation, the facts only prove that the defendant was reasonably provoked. There was a cooling-off period which discounts the requirements of acting in heat of passion, not having time to cool off, and that a reasonable person would not have had time to cool down in that time. The killing of Rachel was premeditated. The proof of the premeditation is found in Barry's own testimony. When Rachel asked if he was there to kill her, he stated yes, no, yes. From that answer and the fact that Barry waited over 20 hours for Rachel's return, murder was at the front of his mind and he was lying in wait. No reasonable person would answer yes or lie in wait for such a period of time. Barry also engaged in deliberation when he strangled Rachel into unconsciousness. What else could the fact that he waited 2 hours to call an ambulance after rendering her unconscious demonstrate other than a rehearsal for the actual event? After the killing, there was a window of time between the act and Barry's admission of guilt to Mrs. Burke, just as he did after the test run. Finally, we have to evaluate the causal relationship between the provocation, the passion, and the killing. It is clear that the killing was a direct result of the provocation. However, there is still insufficient evidence to support a reduction of the sentence from murder to voluntary manslaughter. In this case, the charge of murder should not be reduced to voluntary manslaughter, as the defense has failed to prove sufficient evidence that there was no cooling off period. I rest my case. Thank you.